Now we're going to take a tour through Module 1 and give you some idea of what it's like to be in an online classroom and what you will experience, and give you some suggestions for things that you can do which will help you to be very successful in this course. First of all, notice that the module begins with the title and then dates that tell you about the beginning and the end date. Remember that you can find a calendar for each module in the weekly assignments folder on our course homepage. There's an introduction to the module which gives you an overview for what we are going to be covering. And then as we scan the module, you're going to notice these purple headings, which seem to have divided the module into chunks. These chunks include the various broad topics which we will be covering in this first module or unit of study. Every module or unit of study is approximately 2 weeks long. Sometimes it may be shorter, sometimes it may be longer. Every chunk within the module is made up of a lesson, sometimes practice to go along with that lesson, and it's also made up of an assessment. The assessment is something that you need to complete, some sort of written assignment that shows me what you have learned during that part of the module. The lessons are interactive, and the vast majority of them are built using VoiceThread. They're interactive because within the lesson I will ask you questions, and you are encouraged to make responses to the questions that I ask. It would be like using a whiteboard in a classroom. If the teacher is doing a lecture and then pauses and asks you to get a whiteboard and then has you do some answers to some questions. That's kind of what happens in these lectures. You will hear me speaking, sometimes you'll see me speaking, and you want to think about this lecture as if you were sitting in my classroom. You'll need to take notes. You'll need to write down information. Sometimes you'll need to print handouts or papers that I require you to have to take notes on. The lessons are very important. This is where you're going to do your learning. Some people are very concerned that they don't have a teacher with them when they are taking an online course. But you have something even better. You actually can take me with you wherever you want to go. When you are in my classroom, my physical classroom, at the end of the 80 or 90 minutes that we're together, you leave and I won't see you again for a whole day. You can't really ask me any questions about the material. You can't even hear the lecture again. But in an online course, you have access to my lecture whenever you want it, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for the entire course. There's absolutely no reason that you shouldn't be able to use that lesson again and again and again and again. When you are doing an assessment and you realize you don't understand something, instead of raising your hand to ask me a question about the material, you simply go back to the lesson and listen to it again. If we look at the structure of Module 1, we begin with a brief introduction to the Latin language, which contains a single lesson, no practice, and the assessment. This means that any practice you're doing is embedded within the lesson. So it is very important that when you are looking at the lesson, that you don't just look at the words on the screen, but you listen to the words I say, and you actually do the things that I ask you to do. It's okay if you don't get the answers right. I'm not looking for right answers during a lesson. In fact, I may not even look at your answers in the lesson. The answers in the lesson are for you to practice and to rehearse the things you're hearing, to check for your understanding. Every time I ask you a question, it will be followed by a slide that gives an answer and an explanation. If you don't understand the answer, then you want to go back and listen to things again. And if you still don't understand, then it's time to come over here to that speech bubble and send me a message. When you have completed Lesson 1 and the assessment that goes with it, then you are ready to move on to the second chunk of the module. Do not skip around. These lessons are designed sequentially. If you decide that you're going to start down here with Lesson 4, you won't understand what's going on. You must work through each module chronologically in the order of the lessons. Notice that the lessons are numbered, so you will work chronologically. Lesson 1, and then you must complete the assessment that goes with it, because the assessment focuses specifically on Lesson 1. If you skip and then go back to it, you're not going to remember everything that happened in Lesson 1. You must complete the assessment before you move on. The same is true as we move into the second chunk. Notice that this second chunk of Module 1 is constructed a little bit differently than the first section. In an introduction to Latin nouns, we have 3 lessons, Lesson 2, Lesson 3, and Lesson 4. Each lesson is followed by a practice. The practice sometimes is required, as it is in all of these instances, and sometimes it may say optional. The practice you need to do because it's kind of like homework or classwork. You know how sometimes you're done listening to a lecture in the classroom and then you get home and you go to do the practice, but you aren't sure you remember how to do it? That's sort of the point of having this practice tucked in here between the lesson and the quiz. It helps you to reinforce everything that you've learned in the lesson and make sure that you understand it. If you don't do well on the practice, then you need to go back to the lesson. Listen to what I say, look at what's on the screen, answer any questions that I ask you to really try to understand the material. When you are finished with the practice, then you are ready to take the quiz. The quiz you are allowed to take 2 times. Your grade will be the average of your attempts. The reason that it's the average of your attempts is because this quiz is supposed to be your showing me that you have fully comprehended the lesson and you have done the practice and now you understand and you're ready to move forward. If you take the quiz once and you don't understand something, you need to go back and listen to the lesson and do the practice again. If you still don't do well on the quiz, then you need to contact me, but not before. You need to go through those steps at least twice, maybe 3 times, before you're ready to contact me. Remember, I'm the person talking in the lesson. Chances are I've answered your question. You just have to go back and listen to what I say with your question in mind. Once you have finished with Lesson 2, its practice, and the quiz that goes with it, you'll start Lesson 3, do its practice, go into its quiz, and you'll progress through the section in Module 1, an Introduction to Latin Nouns. When you have completed these 4 lessons, the practices, the quizzes, then you are ready to do the assessment. And once you have completed the assessment, then you are ready to move on to the next section of Module 1, which is called First Declension Nouns. This is structured similarly, although a little bit different from the second section. Here we have 3 lessons, and after each lesson there is a practice for you to complete, and the quiz comes at the end of the 3rd lesson. This is then followed by the assessment. And finally, we have the last two sections, the Learning to Read Latin section and the Latin to English Connection section. This particular setup is the same for every module. In fact, in every module, the last two sections will always be Learning to Read Latin and the Latin to English Connection. And everything that comes in front of it has something to do with a grammatical concept that we're focused on learning. The purpose of this course is to help you to understand how the Romans communicated. And we need to understand how they communicate because we're going to be learning to read what's left of their communication. So there's a lot of grammar concepts that you're going to need to learn and understand. Remember that every time we're learning about this, we're traveling back in time. We're thinking about a language the way an ancient people thought about language. We're getting into their brains and we're learning how they thought about how to express themselves. And when we read their stories, we're reading their thoughts, their ideas. We're seeing how they express themselves. And we'll become intimately acquainted with the Romans, their language, their culture, their ideas, and the way that they thought. I'm very excited that you've signed up to learn Latin, and I think that you'll have a really great learning experience if you follow the suggestions I've given in this video about how to progress through the different aspects of each module. There's some specific questions you might have about how to upload certain things into a quiz or what to do with the practice sessions when you are dealing with them. Make sure you read the directions thoroughly, and if you can't seem to remember how to do something, always go back to the home page and check the course glossary, which has an area of how to in them. You can just search under the letter H for how to do something, like how to register for a VoiceThread account or how to upload a picture to a Moodle quiz. So these are the things that we're getting ready to do. I hope you're as excited to embark on this adventure of learning Latin. And what makes it even more adventuresome is that it's in cyberspace. How cool is that you get to learn about an ancient language on the internet, in space, in the cyber world. I know it's scary for a lot of you because it's your first time, but the key is to making sure that you keep a regular schedule, that you stay focused and disciplined, and treat this just like you would any other class that you meet daily. My name is Magister Johnson, and you're welcome to message me anytime with any questions you have, and I'll try my best to help you. Also, one more thing before we go, make sure you get very friendly with the tech help in your school. At Hempfield, that's in the library. The librarians and Mr. Wagner will be able to answer tech-related questions for you. They should be your first line of defense. And I forget the room number at Penn Manor, that there's a room specifically where you go to find the student help desk and get help with tech questions like how to take a screenshot or why can't I'm having trouble logging in or signing in or those kinds of things. So those are questions you want to make sure you seek out tech help for first. I might not be able to answer all of those questions. Really thrilled to be working with you, and I will look forward to seeing and meeting all of you in our VoiceThread introduction activity today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. Wale, goodbye, and I'll see you soon.